Standing
John,
good.
you want to locate it, Chuck?
I'm sorry, what was that, Bob?
I said, where are you located?
There we go. I'm in Lakewood, Washington.
Oh, man.
Hey, Dave Ron.
Hi.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Dave.
Well, thank you.
Hey, Dave.
Can't get, this club won't let me forget it.
No.
Okay, we're recording, so you know.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Just now recording?
Yep.
How do we want to start the meeting, right?
Sheldon, welcome.
Fine.
Jerry, good morning.
Morning.
Wait till everybody's here, I guess.
Betty, I didn't see you sneak in there. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very fine.
You two look great.
How you
I don't
doing,
know.
Sheldon?
I think you guys have the best wall.
Hey, good. We're trying to figure out how to put my call sign in.
Right
Can't remember where my
click.
name is. What?
Right click. Put your cursor over your name and right click.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
So you can add your call sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
How
shouldn't
many participants do we
We're-
have right now? 18.
all of a sudden.
There are 18 participants at the moment.
That's pretty close to normal there, Clark.
Yeah.
I'd say 20 because there are two people in them.
Where's the
Gotta
donut?
speak louder, Sue, or turn the mic up.
I said there are 20 of us. There are two squares with two people in them.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
We got Joe here as Joe's mailbox or whatever.
Yep,
be
that's
best
me.
if Yeah.
Ooh, Joe, you need a haircut and a shave.
I do. I need both.
You can't find a barber shop open.
My
barber found shop one.
closed.
I
They
found
closed
one.
permanently.
I found one in Rifle. It was open.
Hey, nobody
Yeah,
sees me, so
sure.
it doesn't matter.
Oh,
You
I was
can't
gonna
try-
say
you
I had to
can't-
wait an hour to get a haircut, but I got one.
I was going to say the
Yeah.
Clips and Rifle had 240-minute wait times this week.
Wow.
Oh.
So I'm lucky to only have to wait an hour.
So did you wait in the shop for an hour or outside?
Oh
or what?
no, they made us sit in the car.
Oh, you sat in the car.
Yeah. And they came out and waved us in.
It's crazy. I'll
I
tell you,
haven't touched. Hold on a minute.
I'll tell you, it's crazy going into a restaurant with all the staff in the mask, and they first review you the rules on what the virus looks like, if you have any symptoms, and the rules and all of that, and then they seat you, and the patrons are not wearing masks, and everybody else is, and they're trying to pretend like nothing's going on, like this is not an unusual day. Hi, how are you? And come on back if you can. It's crazy.
Well,
I saw a testimony there of several people who were deniers that caught the virus, and now they're believers. And they say, believe me, you need to wear a mask.
I've been waiting for that to happen to all the people that are mobbing restaurants that shouldn't be open yet. So it'll be interesting to see if that really happens in big quantities.
Goodness.
Well, I'm wondering what Garfield County Health will do with shooters, because Castle Rock's restaurant that opened up, they fined them and shut them down for 30 days.
Well, shooters seems to be,
that's more political than anything, though.
Yeah, because if they come down on her, it's probably she can use that as a political advertisement that she was denied her rights. She's running against Tipton.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dave. That's totally political, and that's part of her campaign.
Yeah, I think so. Some way to gather attention away from him.
Well, she's so single-issued on that kind
Oh
of
yeah.
stuff. I don't know what else she could do.
Are we ready to go?
I am.
Okay.
What I normally do about now is call a meeting and then we go on a round table, but it's difficult for me to, we don't have a round table, number one, and I got a display up here and I can just pick on people, but the display keeps changing, so I don't know how the list is put together. I'm wondering if there's a more efficient way to introduce everybody, but not hearing any suggestions. I can say, first of all, I'm Clark Heckert, president, and I'm here in Placida. And my call sign's K3NI. And I have downstairs November 3 X-ray November Mike Wynn, my older son, and KB3 VSS. I think Peter is in his room asleep, or at least he's quiet. And then KB3 UDU is down at Bighorn Toyota getting her RAV4 service. So I think the next person I'll introduce is Bob. Why don't you take it and then, pass it around?
Okay, this is Bob, K9 Mike Whiskey Mike in Glenwood, and Sue, N0DBY.
All right. I'm just going to go with the list I have here. Kevin is next. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hey, this is Kevin, KD0MA, Glenwood.
Okay, Frank.
N0 AFO, Frankenvale, Colorado.
Brian.
N0 THY, Brian, here at my house in Rifle.
Jerry.
Jerry, oh, okay, Jerry, N6AQQ in Glenwood.
Okay, then there's Bob, K0ALN, right?
Hi there, Bob, K0ALN up in Aspen.
Okay. And then Larry out in the boonies somewhere.
Yeah, N0 ACW in Wolcott, and I'm not getting any picture except for me.
All right. Let's see if I can find anybody else on this display here. Oh, Fred Scully. Fred. Scully.
Fred, you're muted.
I muted myself. Sorry about that. In the RV in Quartzsite, Arizona, about 84 degrees right now at 9 o'clock. So, good morning to everyone.
Fred, do you have any plans to return to Woody Creek?
I'd like to return. Nothing's written in stone yet. So, yeah, I've got to return. If I can, everything goes right, I'll be there at some point.
Okay. Joe Sprick next.
Joe Sprick, AD0CF in Glenwood.
All right. And Ken and Betty. I don't think you guys have introduced yourselves yet.
Yeah, Ken, KD0HP.
Betty, KD0YDH.
You're the one that's talking all the time.
What comes up next? Jeremy.
Jeremy Harwood, KE0HQO, and I am in Michigan.
Okay, Bob Cutter.
Yeah, KI0G, Bob in Glenwood.
And then Richard.
Hi, K4ULD in
Sanford, Florida.
Don, I think maybe I haven't called on. Don Moore, go ahead.
Hi, Don Moore, W0CTX, and I'm the presenter today.
And Jess.
Hi, Jess, W6CKC in Basalt.
Let's see. Did I miss anybody?
You missed Eric.
James just came in.
I'm here. I was making coffee.
Oh, okay. Well, just introduce yourself.
Oh, Sheldon in Aspen, W0SJF.
Thank you, Sheldon. Thank you. Eric, did I call on you yet?
Yeah, this is Eric, K0JEG, Battlement Mesa.
Anybody else I might have missed?
Miss Jim down there?
We think you missed Jim Legg down high.
Oh, Jim's on board here somewhere?
Yeah, he just popped up. The problem with this system, for some reason, it seems that different people have all the pictures of all the other participants in different orders.
Yeah. Yeah, I see Jim's there, but he's probably muted and doesn't know what to do. Hi, Jim.
Hey, this is Jim, AD0LIM. So it's good to be on. I just checked the email, so I figured I better check in.
Okay. Hey, Jim, if we want Phil to participate in any of these meetings, somebody like yourself's going to have to go to his place to sign on, because there's no chance he can sign on with his own computer, even though you have installed Zoom on it.
Yeah, I was talking to Phil a couple of days ago, and he was in there with somebody else. I can't remember who it was, but Phil said that somehow or another, he doesn't know where to find it on his computer, Jim. See, it wasn't emailed. Evidently, he doesn't use email, or he doesn't know how to use it. I'm not sure. And so it wasn't emailed to him. You installed it there, and he does not know where you put it. So maybe you could put it right on the desktop with a shortcut to it, That's what I would suggest. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, that's possible. I'll have to check into it. I have to admit, I didn't realize we were doing this today, so I didn't get a hold of him. So we got miles apart.
I just talked to him before the meeting.
Okay.
And I'm not too optimistic about him being able to do it on his own, no matter what you do. And that's got to be understood. He's really hesitant to try, even. So and he repeats himself, saying that any of this computer stuff goes in one ear and out the other ear. And I told him all he had to do was click on the link that Pete has provided for us and answer with the password. And he said, "Oh, you've already lost me." So I'm not optimistic about his ever being able to do it on his own.
Yeah, but Clark, when you're the link that Pete provided is in the email that Pete sent everybody. Remember, and that's the problem with Phil. He can't. He doesn't know how to get into his email properly.
Yeah, I'm keeping her down here. She's
Yeah,
been going
you're right,
over there and
Jerry.
barking.
That's all of his hang-ups. I think we'll just move on, and according to the schedule, we've got Oh, if I remember correctly, reading the agenda, wasn't there something before the presentation we were going to talk about anybody that had show and tell?
That's off.
Guys, I'm gonna jump off here. I just wanted to say hi to everybody. I got a bunch of things I got to do, so it was nice seeing y'all, and I'll check back in on Tuesday. So take care, you guys.
See you, Jeremy.
Okay, Jeremy.
All right, so do we want just to start with Don, or just any other further discussion?
Yeah, I think we can start with Don and then do show and tell afterwards, see how long it runs.
All right, let's do it. So put Don on, whatever's needed.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is Don out in Newcastle, and I was Barrie Gilbert's brother-in-law, and many of you probably wouldn't have ever heard of Barrie unless you were in the electronics industry. And he was inside of that electronics industry, integrated circuits and things like that. He was one of the most prolific inventors in the 20th century, and it went all the way up till last year, actually, when he retired. So Barrie, he was a physicist by training, and you can see on the screen he was born 1937. And by the way, if there's audio problems or you want to ask a question, go ahead. There's only about 10 slides here, and I'm going to be a narrator. I picked up a lot of articles and posted a lot of things, and after this slideshow, he has quite an extensive museum that my sister Alicia, his widow, will be maintaining or disposing of part of as time goes on. So basically, I got it. Isn't that weird? I'm hitting the space bar and it's not advancing. Let's try another. Well, technical problem. It's stuck. Anybody got any ideas? This is a, make sure we're all plugged up here, but
what I think may be happening is a space bar is being used by Zoom.
Oh.
Try the right arrow.
Right arrow? Okay, no go. How about backspace, escape? I'm frozen up here. Okay, I just tried the roller on my mouse, so we'll go with that. Okay, so anyway, this is a quote of his: "I spent a lifetime in the pursuit of analog elegance," and most certainly did. Picture on the right is actually when he was in college. In 1945, an 8-year-old schoolboy in England who earlier had lost his father during the war fiddled with a position of a cat's whisker and a lump of galena in his crystal set. That was the beginning of his messing around with semiconductors. This is from an article, EDN magazine, which is an industry magazine in 2003. He was basically destined for greatness, and later, using pennies earned from his paper route, he became the beneficiary of war surplus radar. And in 1948, he had a 6-inch cathode ray tube that had come from a radar set. And he announced to his mother, "I'm going to make a TV set with this." And she said, "Sure, dear, that's nice." And he did. And believe it or not, they watched the coronation of Queen Elizabeth in 1953 on that little 6-inch screen. And no one else had a TV on the block, and he and a buddy built it. And that's the kind of guy he was. So basically, let's see, we did that slide. I got to watch this roller here. As he advanced, he went to work. He went to Bournemouth College in Bournemouth, England, and started working for a semiconductor company in the brand new product called Transistor, and that was 1954. And he worked for 2 different companies there, Mullard being a semiconductor tube maker from 1920s. Mullard became part of Siemens. You know, there have been so many different mergers since then. So he was beckoned to come to the USA, and he had he was heading for Hewlett Packard in Colorado, probably up at Loveland, and he got a call from a VP at Tektronix. Confessed that he hadn't taken the job application too seriously. For instance, he addressed the question, do you have any physical limitations? And he said, yes, I rely on a constant supply of oxygen and can't run a 4-minute mile yet. And you can see the sort of wit he has, and that's why I'm showing this. But he was asked to suggest a starting salary. He said, sure, $100,000 would be just great. And so he did accept the $10,400 offer, and off to Portland, Oregon he went. And he just loved being close. He measured on the map that Portland was pretty close to the Pacific, and it reminded him of his home in England. So the Tektronix years were very formative. In fact, you know, back then, you know, Tektronix, like HP and the other great companies, they would say, we start with dirt and we make a product. And they made everything. And that's the plastic cases, the cathode ray tubes, all of the electronics. And this is where he really began to emerge. And he came up with a theory called the Translinear Theory that we'll talk about here a little bit. Don't worry, it won't be technical. But you can see in the picture down there on the left that he'd obviously written this article. That's Barrie on the left in 1968. And he's at the Pancake House, probably up in Beaverton, Oregon. And he's with the co-founder of Tektronix, which today is more than $1 billion company. And that's Howard Vellum, who has passed away in 1986. But they were, everything was very casual back then. And companies like this had their own integrated circuit fabrication facility. They didn't rely on anybody else. And so, and of course, there was a lot of intellectual property involved and that type of thing. And so I interviewed a fellow who's still living that was the father of the Tektronix 7000 series scopes. And by the way, Tektronix, they still lead in oscilloscopes. Even Agilent or Keysight can't keep up with them, the old HP line, when it comes to oscilloscopes. And they were leaders back in the 1960s. And they invented, and I don't think Barrie had anything to do with this, but they invented the storage scope. So you could store what was shown on the screen. It was and that involved the kind of phosphors they used on the tubes. And Barrie's in his museum, he has a lot of tech scopes, and he has a lot of the CRTs, cathode ray tubes that were used in those tech scopes. Now, he had worked at Mullard with scopes, and so I think that's how he was pulled into Tektronix and away from HP, who was trying to get into scopes at the time. And so, of course, Barrie is Mr. Analog, and the world is analog. We're analog beings, and he looked. You know, he had a disdain for digital, and back then there really wasn't any digital except for the big IBM mainframes and things. And so he figured out, and it took a number of years, he figured out that you know, how to on the screen of an oscilloscope put up actual alpha numeric information, and that meant the electron gun had to, just like a TV set, it was different than a TV set, which back then a TV set would draw each line top to bottom or bottom to top fast enough so you wouldn't see it. The oscilloscope had to, with a single gun or two guns, had to, which are controlled by magnetic fields, had to trace out not only the oscilloscope trace, but it also, they figured out how to draw voltages, you know, in other words, the actual number, alphanumeric number of a voltage and the time scale on there. And that revolutionized the oscilloscope industry. There were not digital parts at the time. And quite a deal. The man I was talking to, Les Larson, described, he hired Barrie and described the 5 years they worked together. And it was really quite brilliant what he did. And he came up, he actually published a paper with Tektronix at the time, late, about 1967, 68, when that was called this Translinear Theory, that he just modestly proposed it. and then started developing around it. Then he went back to England. But, you can see the quote there. Barrie would, he'd get all excited talking about circuits, and he'd be driving off to lunch, and then all of a sudden he'd be on the left side driving because he forgot he wasn't in England. And so I think Les got scared a couple times riding with him. So that's the kind of guy he was. He just, his brain was going all the time. And I hope at the end I could describe a little bit how I observed his brain working, which, well, I'll just say it now. If you ever see that TV show, The Good Doctor, and the young doctor is apparently has some kind of problem, but he visualizes things, and he'll see the inner workings in his brain, how things should work inside the human body. I think that's what Barrie was like. He would, we'd visit with him up in Beaverton, Oregon area, and we'd see him in the morning, and he was working from home at the time. This was just in the last couple of years, and he would, we'd have breakfast, and he'd have an English breakfast, and we'd have an American breakfast, but it was centered around eggs and things. And then you could just see him starting to think about something, and then he would go down in the lab, which a lot of times was just sitting in a couch very comfortably, and he'd spend a lot of times the night down there. His brain just drove all the time, and he could see things, and he had a laptop in his lap, literally, and not at a desk, and it was a modeling program, and he would design new circuits, and this might take months, and then he would emerge again and try to act human. He was a nice guy, but I mean, it was sort of funny, but he was always driven by this. So so basically this translinear principle, he got the idea about the time he was leaving Tektronix, and it's all about transistors, analog transistors, and he would describe these circuits using bipolar junction transistors, which are so easy to make and common. But it was like a way to think about it. Instead of having a digital circuit, which you couldn't do economically, then let's say to take the square root, or to square something, or double a frequency, or mix two signals together, he could elegantly solve in real time. That's what an analog circuit will do, will give you in real time the answer. So inside an oscilloscope or some other device, instrumentation or something like that, it's just real time operating. And one good example is FM demodulation is taking the anti-logarithm, and he had a circuit that would do that. And the funny thing is, it's always the same circuit. It's 4 transistors, and you're talking nanoamps and nanovolts, and keeping noise low. And he was a physicist, so he understood all these relationships. But he was very practical. He could make it happen, and we'll go ahead with some of the things. But he described this translinear circuit, translinear principle was what spawned hundreds of products by lots of companies using his Gilbert cell mixer or his translinear principle. And it just described how we're used to everything being linear, how you can take a nonlinear device and cause it to have a relationship back to the linear world, and just pure elegance. So he joined Analog Devices. They're now a multi-billion-dollar company, and one of the founders is still living. And he joined them in 1979. They realized, he went back to England for a few years, and they realized what he was capable of doing. So Analog Devices is based on the East Coast, and so he went there and signed on with them, and he'd been doing some consulting work for them from England. And he said, "I don't want to live here." And Ray Seda, the founder of Analog Devices, said, "Where do you want to live?" And he says, "Well, I want to go back to Portland area." And he said, "Okay," and seated him $500,000 to go open what was called the Northwest Labs, owned by Analog Devices. And he was just free to start working. And so he built up, it grew rapidly, and he built up maybe 50 engineers. And at his memorial service, I was able to meet quite a few of these people. And they described Barrie, what he was really like, which was just an outstanding human being and so bright, it was unbelievable. And, you know, he had basically an entry-level degree, and he disdained PhDs running around and stuff like that. And you'll see later, he doesn't like marketing people, that type of thing. But they just gave him free rein to develop things. And so some of his circuits, some of the little integrated circuits that they came out with in the early 70s or late 70s, early 80s, they're still manufacturing. They're in such demand that, and they're in every amazing product. Well, anyway, make sure I'm in the right spot here. So that's my sister Alicia. She's 20 years younger than Barrie, and she's 9 years younger than I am. And so they met. Alicia was actually a device physics type person as well. She went to Purdue University, and then she was working for Intel out in the Portland area. She was with HP down in Colorado Springs for a little while, and we were both living in Colorado, and that was nice. But off to Intel she went, and she met Barrie at a conference. Now Barrie had raised a family with 4 children, and so he was sort of stuck. He was divorced, I guess, and ready to sort of start the second life. And you look at when you see people that are 20 years apart, well, there's always, I guess, a backstory. In case of my sister, she had in her 20s, she had contracted MS, multiple sclerosis, and it was affecting her job. And Intel was very, very good to her and asked her what she wanted to do. Well, as it turned out, she met Barrie, and they of course got married and everything, and she didn't have to work anymore. He provided for her, took care of her. But as far as MS patients go, she's still doing well today at age 63. That's just, you know, it's easy to get worn down. But I had a brother that passed away from it, and it can be just a horrible, debilitating disease. I'm sure you know people with it, but she's always been able to take care of herself, and she's doing well and completely cognitive sharp and everything like that. So, but if you're looking at the border of their, now this isn't their wedding announcement, this is their engagement announcement. And talk about corny, the border is NPN in alternating PNP transistors. And that's just sort of they both had an interesting sense of humor. And on the right, if you can see it, I see there are a lot of camera overlays there, but it says we've been fine tuning our plans, and we're going to enter the solid state, the solid state of matrimony, and they did, and that was in 1990. So it's been, it was a very good 30-year run for Alicia, and she's of course very sad today. He passed away just on January 30th this year. So here's a look at Barrie, the upper right there. They were both cat lovers. Alicia still has 1 or 2 cats. Now their home in, it's Aloha, Oregon. They're part of Beaverton. To get down in this lab of his, this museum, actually, you have to take an elevator. There's not even a staircase. They built it down in the depths of this home. And there's a picture. These are all Barrie pictures. He's that middle one there where we don't know what he's holding, but he's just a joker. You know, he was probably making some kind of joke when the picture was taken. But he has quite a museum, and that's destined to be moved to a new home that they were preparing to move to. And of course, he was like a lot of brilliant people. You know, he had an interest. He was a musician, and he had interests in that and things like that. So there's quite a. I'm going to be helping her. We'll talk more. I have pictures, more pictures later of his all the stuff he collected and over the years and such. I think he might even have his original crystal radio. Most of his other stuff is stuff he acquired from eBay over maybe a 20-year period or something. So, so anyway, they were contemplating a new home. They purchased a house in Wilsonville, in south side of Portland, I guess, in 2019. That upper left picture, unfortunately, they weren't able to move there. He had a unfortunate accident at home. One of those deals where he'd fallen before, but this time took a hard hit on the head, went into a 5-day coma, and then passed away. They said he would have never recovered. That's trouble with ceramic floors and things like that. Although he was careful, it just sounds like he passed away. I mean, he passed out and his head hit so hard that it created some brain damage there. So there's the last picture of Barrie and Alicia. I think that was December of last year. And but just a delightful man, and to be around somebody like that brilliant is just sort of mind-boggling. Although he was very unassuming, and now I'll have to say I had to, I'm an electrical engineer, and let's see, if he's 100 on the scale, I'm 1. Okay, so in the scale of engineering, and so early on we came to sort of an unwritten agreement. He'd have me sit and watch him design integrated circuits, and he'd be testing it. And of course, I'm not trained as an electronics engineer, power engineer. It's the other end of the spectrum, So once he understood, I didn't know what I was talking about. He lightened up on me a little bit, but he would test you to see what you knew, but he wouldn't put you, like make you feel uncomfortable or anything. But I just said, Barrie, I don't know what you're talking about. And then he'd move on a little bit. There's a picture that's upper left is 1951 in college, and very hands-on for somebody that's an inventor. This picture I grabbed off the internet last night, and he's sitting he's at some college in Eastern Europe, about ready to receive an honorary degree. You can see him down below receiving it a little bit later, but he has a gown on at that point. And but I can just imagine knowing him. If you look at the picture on the left, he's probably dreaming up another circuit. He's probably saying, oh, I can't wait for this to get over. I want to get back to the hotel room. I want to open up my laptop and keep that happening. In fact, I've seen him just like somebody that has to go take a nap. He has to go design something. He'll just get squirmy and excuse himself, and go ahead. But here's some of his things that he said. Now I'll read this. Make transistors dance. Barrie was not a fan of standard circuit cells. A cell would be like a little, maybe a grouping of 2 or 3 transistors. And when you're designing an integrated circuit, you're basically dragging and dropping these items in there. And he called himself the tinkerer. That's how he would refer to himself. And again, the guy's thinking about nanoamps and realize that you'll see a little bit more of this later, but they gave up trying to say, would you make this for us? Would you design that for us? He'd just go figure something out, and then it would be a brand new radio product. And what started out as a few megahertz ended up in the gigahertz world, and just applying this translinear principle all the way up through radio. It's in every cell phone, and you're talking billions of parts now. But he would make it was all about elegance, simple and elegant. So he didn't like things that were standardized, and so he, after World War II and working with surplus electronics, he saw them as living beings. They could mutate. They were all had individuality, and he had with his passion for classical music. Everything was like a symphony to him, and he crafted it. That's how he did everything, working holistically in concert with sister subcircuits. And you just try, like this business of a band gap bias cell and transconductance and things like that was how he invented. So, and the other thing is he'd start at the end, and that would, being so practical, he would, before you even put down that first transistor into an integrated circuit, he deliberated the package size, the pin outs. A lot of integrated circuits, you wish there was one more pin. Why didn't they bring that voltage or that signal out so you could look at it or do something with it? And he was very good at that. In fact, I had an opportunity. I'm what you call a nut and bolt engineer. I connect the dots, so if there's a couple integrated circuits, I hook them together. And so about 1993, Barrie and Alicia were visiting, and I said, Barrie, I want to do a radio. I hadn't done this yet. I was getting into avionics after finishing up my power engineering degree. And I always played with radios, a ham radio and everything. And he pulled out a napkin and he started drawing, and he says, here's your receiver. I said, wow, that's really something. And I sort of understood it, not quite. He said, we're coming out with that next year. That's the AD607, and that'll give you, that's a second IF, and you can get INQ out of it, which is very common today. That's what's in all these SDRs and everything. It was all analog, a little $5 part, and I found myself 2 years later actually designing that into a product, and it worked. And the other thing about analog devices, and there are a lot of good designers there, and they're, they have hundreds of people now designing. Their parts work very well. They characterize them. Not everybody's parts work as well as the data sheet would say, and so I counted on that to work, and it really, really did. And we used it for a number of years. So, but he would start at the end and work backwards, and aesthetics and clarity of purpose and everything were all part of it. Here's a little, he loved to put on a presentation, and there are YouTube type, you can find, if you Google them or go on YouTube and just say Barrie Gilbert, you can find it's usually an hour and a half long or something, but he just loved to give presentations. So this is a little story where he was traveling and his luggage was lost, and he was on his way to Milan to give a presentation, and his luggage had his slides in it and everything. And so he had to get clothes and everything. And so now he walked into this room where there's a paying audience, and he has nothing. So he said, well, let's go to lunch. So they had their lunch, and then I found the paper, and he just dove into just right off, a blank screen and everything. And he said, let's talk about op amps. And they're supposed to, so he shoots down all these myths, and everybody enjoyed his presentation, so that was the kind of guy he could just start out and keep going. And here's a picture of him. Not sure the setting, probably close to his retirement. So away with marketing or working around marketing. And I met some of the marketing people at Analog Devices, and they just would be seething. They just couldn't get over that they weren't in charge of Barrie. And so basically, so the fellow that took over the Northwest Labs for him wrote this here and published it recently. So Barrie volunteered, they wanted new product ideas. So he pops in 70 slides that were animated about his new latest variable gain amplifier, and 20 unique ways it could be used in different applications. And then he's next, and he says, I sheepishly followed with an unimaginative one-pager. I quickly learned that product design is much more than circuit design. So Barrie could sell to management what he was doing, and then one of his other things, the rules are for insects. Barrie despised arbitrary constraints, whether they be schedules or the infamous voice of the customers or circuit topologies. Many marketing directors struggled to control and direct his efforts. A laundry list of predefined specifications accompanied by demands to stay within scope would be unceremoniously tossed into the trash bin and replaced with a complete self-inspired data sheet. And you know, the upper management of Analog Devices just had to chuckle all the time, because he would come up with stuff and they say, what's this for? And he said, well, you want to measure power in a cell phone, you want to measure power in a transmitter and not worry about it bouncing up and down with the modulation. You want true RMS power at 0.01 dB resolution. Here's your part. And he spawned, like in these log amp power detectors, there's probably about 20 devices that are in their product line, and they just work fantastically. They just nobody else could do it. And then so other companies make those things, but they have to pay a royalty to Analog Devices. So his intellect, they learn not to harness it, which hurts a lot of engineers where you just have to work on things. They could see that his genius there. This is worth reading. This is from Electronic Design Magazine 2003. Doris Kilbane's the author, and you can find this on the internet. But it's interesting because I'm trying to scratch my head over what's invention versus discovery. But he muses over the terms invention, innovation, and discovery. Invention is an instant, he says. It's all about thought and ideas that happen anywhere, in the bathtub, on a train, even while dozing. But innovation is a process. It's about things and doing things. It requires time, equipment, energy to put your thoughts into things. And he was excellent at that. See, discovery happens when an unexpected event fortuitously encounters a prepared mind. And that was his mind, right? There's a lot of overlap. It's often hard to know whether one is creating or discovering. He notes that invention is often a solitary pursuit, but the innovation needed to breathe life into ideas is always a team effort. I've had the good fortune of being surrounded by outstandingly talented people, dedicated people, but any large organization has its share of doubters and naysayers who should be politely but firmly ignored, which he did. The creation of something truly novel requires swimming against powerful undercurrents of ingrained opinion. So, and I think Richard, you probably, you know, you can understand Barrie, you know, in his background, it'd be really pretty easy for him just to push someone aside and, you know, and bluster off and go do his thing, you know. So it's a wonderful trait, you know. So that's that was the. I think we can stop and have some questions here at this point, and then I'm going to do a brief slideshow of his museum items. So we can take a break and we can talk and whatever. Need a potty break, for example. You know.
Can I say a few things? Am I on?
Yes, you are on, Richard. Did you know?
Okay, I'm fascinated. Actually, a wonderful talk. Thank you very much. But at the age of 17, I went to get a job, and I had two choices. I could actually go and work for the GPO to become a telephone engineer, or I could go and work for Mullard radio valves.
Oh boy!
Which you mentioned at the beginning of your thing, and in the event, I was accepted by both, but I opted for the for the GPO to become a telephone engineer because they were going to send me to college and get the qualifications that I'd failed to get traveling around the world with my as an army brat. So it's interesting that, and then later on I ended up in the British Telecom Development Department. I think at that time it was still called the Post Office, and we were dealing with development of things called MEL blocks, which was Mullard encapsulated logic, which was sort of halfway between the valve, well, you know, between the transistor and the integrated circuit, because basically what they did, they took the actual transistors and they potted them in epoxy resin, and then you used them like you would use sort of integrated circuits today. But I do remember the Tektronix scopes that we used to have in the development laboratory. I mean, they were enormous things on wheels and trolleys, and you know, they've got to be what, 4 foot by 5 foot by whatever, and enormous things with tiny little screens. I treated myself, and I don't know whether you can see this, but I bought myself an oscilloscope.
All right.
I mean, look at this thing now, and to be quite honest, the manual's got 100 pages on it, and I haven't really got around to working out how to do all the things it can do. But when you think about what those old scopes were like back then, I do remember they had to wheel them in, and they were very expensive. My goodness, that one cost me like I think just short of $200. So that's all I had to say. But thanks again, great talk.
Well, thank you. Did you know Barry? Because he was at Mullard probably 1954, so you probably came along later.
No, I didn't. As I say, I was 17 in 1961, so I think he had 7 years ahead of me.
Sounds like it. Okay, very good. Well, any other questions or comments? And I can move on and show you a little bit about his museum here.
Don, I have a question. This is Jess. In the picture you had of his museum in the basement where you talked about he went down in the elevator, on, I think it was the left side of the picture, seemed like there were vacuum tubes. And was that a part of his discovery, invention, or collection? How were the vacuum tubes that important in his museum?
That's because Britain was, of course, in World War II, they really had the first radar systems, and they could see the Luftwaffe coming. And they developed the Klystron radar tubes, which were very large, and they were water cooled. And of course, Barrie played with those as a kid. And then when he went to Mullard, they were getting out of valves or vacuum tubes at that time, moving in, like Richard said, into transistors and then early circuits that were encapsulated. And you can actually go to, if you look up Mullard, M-U-L-L-A-R-D, you can they're part of a bigger company now, but you can actually see some of these devices. So he experimented with those, but went to Mullard and one other company. He was in England. He was really into the transistor forefront. Although he had some involvement with tubes.
Maybe shut up. You can hang on to it.
So, yeah. Anyway, so to answer your question, he loved tubes, and he has quite a collection. And he would take me down there, and he'd say, "Look at this," and he'd say, "This was the only tube ever made that did dit." So he was very intimate with vacuum tubes, and it was his first love. And so he has quite a collection. He has Klystrons. He has not only, he has lots of examples of Mullard valves and a lot of American-made. And he has hundreds and hundreds of tubes that he can show. Now, I don't know. I'll get back to Sharon here. I don't know if there'll be any in this picture as I go up. I'm trying to make this as big as possible, but why don't I just spin through it and you can ask more questions, but I'm looking for my arrow to advance this. Let's see what happened here. Yeah, still sharing, I assume. Yeah, I think I'll just have to, my little side arrow is not, well, here we go. Let's see if I can maintain this and make it big and not lose the arrow. Yeah, the arrow disappears.
Keep going to your right. It's probably on the very edge of that window.
Yeah, don't go.
A little more. Keep going the whole way over.
I'm over somebody's head now.
There it is. It's right there.
Oh, it was there. Okay. I've got everybody's camera shot there, so I don't see it.
Yeah, so you're on it now, so you can click.
All right. So interrupt me if you see something that is in the picture. These are pieces of test apparatus. You can see it up through maybe the 70s, but all the way back 100 years. And test instruments. That's one end of the museum. It just crammed. Like we were going to take an inventory of all the radios, and there's just nowhere to. You have to pick one up and walk out somewhere, photograph it, put it, in a box, and she's preparing to have it moved. And there's a radio club up there. They're not a hammer club. They're a museum club that want to help her get things moved and such. here's some really early, here's a test instrument. Down in the bottom is a Wheatstone bridge. The cylindrical shape on the left is some kind of variometer. It's an inductive coils that rotate with a crank. And this would be 1910, pushing into 1920 when broadcast started. He has lots of brands of radios, including deforest radios that use the early valves, which turn out don't work very well. There are some of these radios are very hard to operate, but there are some English ones, but a lot American, like Crosley, and you'll see some others here. And I looked up AM broadcasting in the U.S. and it was about 1920, 1921, and then a bunch of companies popped up and started making them. And there's a lot of history here. There's one called Colin Kennedy, and that was out in San Diego. And those, I believe, are some Colin Kennedy radios there. Some of these won Best of Show, and then he would buy them. So they're all probably tested, work, but they're not powered up there. But they're just wonderful examples of the early days of broadcasting. Now, there's a Marconi set there that's probably extremely historical, and that would be early 1920s. That would be English Marconi. There was Canadian Marconi, English Marconi, and of course Italian Marconi. They didn't call it that, but you can see just a lot of stuff here that he treasured. There is a big tube there. I don't know if that's the one you saw, Richard. That's a big valve, and I'm sure that's a radar tube, and big copper cathode on the top there, surrounded by old broadcast radios.
Hey, Don, I have a question.
Yeah.
Was what you said, Collins Kennedy, was that related to the Collins?
His first name was Colin, C-O-L-I-N, Colin Kennedy.
Ah, okay, sorry.
Yeah. And if you look that up, there are some wonderful sites out there, historical sites. And he manufactured in San Diego and also St. Louis, and they disappeared after a couple of years. They were very high-end radios. Most people couldn't afford them, but they worked well. And some, again, challenging to tune and operate. This would go up through long wave, medium wave, up to the top of the broadcast band, well, as far as they could make it back then. Some other and I was up there for the memorial, and so I've been in his museum many times, and but I just went through and just took a bunch of pictures because to come back here, I was going to try to start helping her relocate it. You'll see in the lower left of that picture an ARC, I think it's an ARC 5 receiver. It might be a transmitter that would be a rack mounted on a B-17. That'd be an American radio man would use a rack of those. The ticker tape business up above, I'm not sure about. And you'll see from very early to early 1920s in that view as well. There is a box of tubes, and those were, you just hadn't gotten to them yet. And there's a lot of history sitting right there. And one of a kind, two of a kind. I'm sure there's a lot on display. I did not concentrate on his tube display, but he has a whole wall of those. And you can see it would be a full-time job for somebody for 2 or 3 years to really properly catalog this and get it out. It's too much of a burden on my sister. As she is moving to the new place, they will move everything over there because she's going to sell this house. And so a lot of things will get boxed up, and I think it'll be properly. There's somebody in that club up there that will, it's a paid position that she'll spend a few $1,000s having them do the work. She can't lift anything or be expected to do that, but she can work with it once it's cataloged and such.
Hey, Don, I got another question.
Yeah.
Why you haven't mentioned so far that she was a ham? Could
Yeah.
you do a little background on her and how did she become a ham radio operator?
Well, she started probably, probably, growing up, she was 9 years younger. She's my little sister, and I became a ham when I was about 13. Somebody's drawing on here, and on that screen, that's funny. But there, got erased. That's not me. That's cool. So, this was in the 1960s. So that inspired her, and then I went off to college and never lived at home again. But so she decided to get her license, and she did, and so she got it at a young age. In fact, I think she was on a cover of QST back in the maybe 1979, and she's always kept that call sign in Indiana there. Then she went off to Purdue. She's always kept a station. She hasn't been active in a while, although I've got her, they own a couple CTX 10s. She's got a couple of those. She has some big Yaesu equipment, and she's going to get it back on the air. I've shown her FT8, and she likes CW, and she could do it if she wants in single sideband. So she's going to get I told her buy a step higher vertical and just go for it and get that thing installed. So we expect to get her on the air and cracking along here one of these days. So she did it all of her life. Although when she married Barrie wasn't a ham. That it was pretty much, and they had a house that was just non-conducive for an antenna. So it was very frustrating to operate there. So, well, that's an interesting one. What's that one? The Master Phone Company, Iowa City, Iowa. Well, look at that, huh? Isn't that something? One tube deal there. Here's Echo Phone, and that's, look at that. They called it the Radio Shop. That's for 1920-21. That's pretty interesting to be called the Radio Shop, Sunnyvale, California. Before they called it Silicon Valley, I thought 40 years. That's not a very good shot, but these would, you could have an amplifier. That's what the piece on the right would be. You could strap on an accessory and it would go across. And these are all battery operated type deals. Here, there's your deforest radio there. Look, and that's just built on a board. And maybe it's a shallow box, but the variometer is up on top and one of the deforest valve tubes they're shown. Apparently these did not work well. So that's why there's a lot of controversy about Lee deforest and product espionage and stuff. Now here's a rare piece. This is a Marconi transmitter. It's a T1155, and he has two. It's the only transmitter I could find there. World War II era, of course. It was on Lancaster bombers. He has two of the companion receivers. They have big dial, and of course, this was for communications when they were on bombing runs over France and Germany. And I think it's all there, and he has manuals on it. So I've sort of got my eye on that set. So we'll see what happens. I think that's a repeat. Some of these are repeats, yes. So I won't bore you with them. But there you can see various, I don't know the brand on the upper left, but you see the tubes. Those are five tubes poking out.
Yeah, that am I on? Can you hear me? This is
yes, Jerry.
Atwater Kent above on the right
a
side.
lot of these pictures are of what they used to call TRF receivers, like this one at the bottom. There were 3 knobs on it and then 2 small knobs.
Yeah.
Those were TRF, or tuned radio frequency receivers. They were very, very common before the super heterodyne was invented. Very hard to tune and all, because you had to set all those knobs. When I first got into college, I took a sort of a technician level course in radios, and we had some of those, and you could play with them. They're very interesting.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've never used one myself, so I have a 1-tube RCA here that I'm going to fire up, and I paid $25 for it, and I think it's worth about 500, but I'm going to hang on to it. So one of these days I'll start playing with, hopefully I'll have a couple of these to, if anybody just had to have something here, we could always find out what it's worth, and I can wait when I get an inventory of everything. I'll make sure the club gets a first look at something to see.
So the Atwater Kent stuff is kind of interesting. My dad collects Atwater Kents, but the in the lower right of this picture, there's a part of a Atwater Kent breadboard there, the 3-tube little cluster there. That looks like it's from an Atwater Kent breadboard, and that's pretty rare. They didn't have a lot out there.
So you're familiar with that? That's amazing. I see. I didn't know what I was looking at when I got there. I'm looking for my right arrow button. That might be the last picture, actually. So I think I can stop sharing now, and because I've been through everything, and I assume we're finished. I didn't run over time. That's good. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at any point in time. So it'll be sort of interesting. I'm watching over my sister to make sure she doesn't get overloaded. She has a lot of things to worry about, and this is sort of taking back burner. So we're just trying to get everything set up so that she's get it moved and get it cataloged, so it just isn't a burden on her. Her time will come where she'll be able to deal with it. And she had some people visit her that knew Barrie, and they said, you really need to set up a small museum at their home, which she will do. And I would think about 80% of this will be looking for a home somewhere. And that's a tough deal. We've worked with the museums, one museum up there. They don't have a museum, they're a club. And they said, watch out who you talk to. A lot of times they want it for nothing, and then they go auction it off on eBay just to pay their expenses. So there's a lot of sort of shady museum operations, if you can believe that, so got to be careful. And you don't want it, how many people are really interested in seeing this old stuff? So it's a pretty small audience. It's us and a few thousand other people. So people like Analog Devices won't, they don't see a need to do anything with that stuff. And I've even talked to electronics people. Tektronix has their own museum, by the way, and it's up in the Portland area, and it's got all. If you're ever up there, there's plenty of. You can see enough oscilloscopes to last you a lifetime. So, with that, I'll turn it back.
I wanted to make a comment. First of all, I want to say that we went on yesterday and did a little test and to see how things were going to work. And masterful job. Everything technically worked out great. Wonderful presentation. So I'm glad everything worked out. Very nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Why don't you unmute everybody, and then if people have questions, or they can use their space bar. Thanks, Don. That was spectacular.
It was fun doing it.
Yeah, it's credible.
I also did it for my sister. She couldn't attend today, but I'll send the PowerPoint up to her, and she'll really appreciate that I did that. And so
you have to get Eric's video to her.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you.
Yeah, for everybody who's listening, what you can do is you can just Google YouTube or go to YouTube anywhere you care, and then enter Eric Grumling, Grumling, or you can check it out on our name and address list. And all Eric's material is there. He's done a really great job over the last few. Yeah, Eric, it's pretty neat if you start looking at it. You don't stop at one thing. You go on and watch him fly his drones or something. But yeah, Susie and I also went with my brother-in-law, Joe K6WAO, and we went down to Virginia City, which is south of Reno, and there's a guy there that has a private museum, and if you're ever in that area, just, you got to call him and he will open the doors for you. He charges you like $5 or something like that. But he has a marvelous collection too. So not as good as this one though, Don.
Photo girl looks good.
Yeah, I think those valves are fascinating. I actually went, well, college took us up to Daventry in England, where they had the third program of the BBC Transmitter, and the valves there were like, you know, 4 foot high with water jackets on them. Unbelievable place, amazing. But I don't know, do they still have valves now for broadcast transmitters? I don't know.
I think they do for AM broadcast and everything. I think solid state's slowly getting there, but
right.
Yeah, all those, you know, if you want a 10 megawatt, I think Voice of America, in fact, I know for sure WWVB out in Hawaii uses, they still use valves. They have their 10 kW transmitters and they maintain those. So they get the valves rebuilt. And I think Russians are the only ones that'll really maintain valves anymore.
Yeah.
But it's done, you know.
I know that
hey, Richard?
my PA, if I need to get new valves for my PA in Colorado there, and the SB200, by all accounts, those valves are only available from Russia. Or is it China? Maybe it's China.
Yeah, Russia via China, right?
Yeah.
Here you go, Richard. This is 10 kW.
There you go. Wow. Where'd you get that?
That's a 41000 from my amplifier in the basement. Larry knows about this. Anyway, yeah, I have a 41000 amplifier.
How come I can't see it? Where are you?
Richard, scroll.
Oh yeah, in the corner there, yeah. Oh yeah, blooming heck.
Looks like a brand new tube.
Yeah.
I've got 2 3500Zs in my Henry.
Goodness me, that's beautiful. You ought to have that mounted on a piece of good quality mahogany.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
Oh, now look at this.
That's a 3500 here. Okay. Yeah. And anyway, the 41000. But you know, there's still real vacuum tubes, not like the CX series.
Goodness me.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, great. Well, I must admit, you know, I wonder what size radio has those inside. It's sort of not portable, is it? Goodness me. So it's interesting. My parents actually lived in Bournemouth for a while, where, you know, you were talking about where he came from.
Mm-hmm.
But they lived in the New Forest, and they moved there, and they expected me and my family to all go there every weekend because, you know, it was on the seaside. But you know, life isn't quite like that. You know, you've got other things that they've got to do, their sports and their brownies and the Girl Guides and all that stuff. But I always remember they moved there for a while and they thought, oh, you know, they're going to be seeing the grandkids every weekend, but it didn't quite work out. I mean, we went there a few times, but not every weekend. It was quite a drive. So,
how long to drive there?
Yeah. Yeah, from well, it was Kingston upon Thames, which is near Wimbledon. That's where everyone goes. But, yeah.
And once she gets things moved and reorganized and cataloged, do you think she'll have any kind of museum? And do you think that she'll open it up to let any kind of museum or go in to see any of the things?
You know, that's a possibility, and that local club up there might be willing to operate it. So, because it's going to be in a separate building. They took a barn, and it's probably 20 by 40 feet and 2 stories high, and they'll make that into, at least part of it, into a museum. I still think there's too much that she wants to hang on to and maintain. So I do think, so yes, I think she'll have that. How she feels about it being open to the public, I don't know, but maybe that radio club, if they came up with a facility, then she would loan a lot of that over there so the general public could see more of it. So it is a TBD, and there's a couple possibilities that somebody might, I heard up from Washington State, might buy the whole thing, most of it, and set up a museum. So there's a couple possibilities, but it takes not so much the value of that, which I think is probably $500,000 sitting there. I don't.
Oh, blimey, yeah. What about Mullard? I wonder if Mullard would be interested. Mullard would be interested in doing something for all that, you know, because like I always remember going to Motorola in Chicago and seeing their museum of everything that they produced over the years.
And do they still have that museum, Motorola?
I don't think so. I haven't been there for a long time now, but they did. Yeah, they had everything there, you know, with all their wartime enormous walkie-talkies that the American Army used.
Can I interrupt 1 second? I see that Jim got Phil down there. So Phil, why don't you guys unmute and say hello to everyone?
Hi, everybody. Phil, N0KE.
Hey,
did you
Phil,
come down
good
to
see you.
Jim's?
No, he brought that thing to my house. I have no idea how this thing works. It's too complicated.
Well, you look really good.
Yeah, I'm not wearing glasses except when I go out in the sun, and they're just sunglasses.
Good to see you, Phil.
Hey, good to see you guys.
That's great.
Get Jim on here too.
I was on earlier.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Don, the other question I wanted to ask you, do you ever think they'd take any of that equipment and put it on the air as a commemorative type broadcast or anything like that?
No, I don't know. I don't know. I'm curious about transmitter sites. You know, most of those are disassembled and gone and that type of thing. But it'd be interesting in a museum if you had a low power transmitter, and then you could, on different frequencies, of some programs running, and then people could try the radios and tune them and everything. So yeah, I think it'd be, you know, a lot of times you go in museums and it's just sort of static display, and a hands-on museum I think would be, because I still don't think you'd wear everything out. You know, he has so much stuff. He has enough tubes to keep those radios going for a long time. So, but yeah,
The kind of approach I was thinking about, I had a chance, as I'm sure many of us have, to go back to W1AW, and they give you a little certificate for operating. And if you were able to visit and operate, or you were able to receive, that'd be
cool. Yeah,
that'd be cool.
I say one thing that occurs to me, you know, in England, on the River Thames there in London, you've got the HMS Belfast, which was a First World War battleship, which is moored there permanently like a museum. But it has a amateur radio station on board, you know, and you can make contact with that, usually at weekends, and you can get the QSL card from there. But also, there the British Museum in London, the Science Museum, that also has a ham radio station. Again, you can, you know, go and work and operate it. It just occurs to me that maybe the RAF might be interested in that World War bomber transceiver.
Yeah, they might. Yeah,
yeah.
There are very few out there. So it's and rightfully that's where it belongs. Really, is somewhere where it can, you know, be tied to its history and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are quite a few places like that. The Queen Mary down at Long Beach Harbor there in LA, they I think they still have their ham station in the radio room there on the Queen Mary. I'm not sure about that. I haven't. When I lived out there, I used to hear them on the air all the time, but I haven't listened for them for a long time.
Yeah. Interesting.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. Well, do you want me to show you my, bore you with one of my latest electronic toys?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I made one of these little pixie transceivers.
Hey, Jess. Jess,
Can
I
you see
have
that?
a question for you.
See you.
Oh yeah, wait a minute, I've got the wrong way around. I've got
These
to do that,
pictures
haven't I?
that I'm looking at here in this gallery of rogues gallery, you might call it. They keep jumping around with no seeming reason. Do you have any idea why that happens? And is there any way to prevent that from happening?
Well, let's let Richard do his presentation and show and tell, and then we'll come back to that if that's all right, Jerry.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Can we figure out how to share that? How Richard can share that rather than you know, look at the small square.
How do you get the big, make it big? Does that work?
Every time somebody says something, it goes away.
Right, because it switches automatically. That's why it's doing that. So Rich,
Okay, so if I keep talking, can you see it? Is it filling up the screen? Yeah. Well, anyhow, this one
if you
here.
go to speaker view, as long as somebody's talking, it'll hold.
Yeah. Okay. I'll keep talking. So this is the Pixie, and that's another one there. The difference is this one is obviously an upgraded version because it flashes a light and it's got a little buzzer on it, whereas the other one doesn't have that. And I think they were sort of $7 or $8 in kits, and they came from China, but there was no instructions with it, and so I had to sort of work out which component goes where, sort of thing, and measure all the resistors and whatnot. But yeah, it worked out okay. And then these two, obviously I've shown you these before. They're the old what do you call it, QRP Labs transceivers. I've made one with 20 meters and the other 40. And then this is the 50 watt PA, again from QRP Labs. And I had another one. Yeah, this is the other one. This is the 10 watt PA, which is that one there. So anyhow, I've got to learn how to do Morse code now because these things all work in Morse code. Oh, the other thing is, I think I showed you before, is my little frequency counter, again from China. And it's quite nice because it comes in a little plastic, it comes with a plastic case for it. So that seems to work quite well. And I've actually tested that on my oscilloscope. Anyhow, that's it.
Yeah, I've got a couple of fill codes that I'm trying to restore that I've got out here that I can show.
Right.
Okay, I've got a couple of fill codes I can show.
Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, okay. All right. Can't really see too well here. Let's see here. Anybody's okay? That one is one well, actually, I picked both these radios up at a an old auction, but these are them from the outside, and I'll show around on the backside here in a minute. But this one I think is the vintage is about 1946, and but I polished up the case and repainted the black on it and got a new Philco sticker for it. And then the other radio is right next to it right here, and I still got to do a little bit more work like that on there too. Got a grill speaker cloth I still need to get onto that. This one I think is the vintage. I think is 1941 or 42. I'm not too sure. But there's still the bezel I've got to put back in, and I've got a replication dial card here, but still have to put that in. And of course I got some replication speaker cloth. So I've still got to work on that. But the main thing I've been wanting to do now is get these things working. And I'm going to go run my laptop around the back side here and show you that. But let's see here. It came off. Hope the battery holds that on this thing. Okay, this is on the Philco from you can see it there. I can pull this out here also. But yeah, I got a couple other more modern ways of hooking up batteries to it. But she got static through this. But I think and it's been a while since I've monkeyed with it. But I think might be some problem between, I think, in the IF stage or something like that. I'm not too sure. But anyway, I had soldered. Okay, this one needs this new IF transformer still. I don't know how well that shows up on here. But I'd soldered in some new wires, left some old wires in there that were in good shape. And but I hooked up batteries. These are 90-volt radios. I hooked up 10 9-volt batteries just by putting them together and then putting some pigtails on the ends. So, but I got static through them, but that's the best I've gotten on it so far. And so I'm still hoping to possibly find some type of assistance in getting these things running. Here's the other one, and this one only has 4 tubes. This other one I just had 5. But I can pull it back out this one here also. And I did find one new IF transformer. It's right through there. And let's see. And again, I've soldered, mostly, I think put a new oscillator on this one also. But again, this one I'm only getting mild static, not hardly anything at all out on it. So still not too sure quite yet what the problem is, and I'm still a newbie at it. So anyway, but that's sort of what the status of these radios are right now at this time here. Anyway, does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, those 2 radios that you've got there, when I was growing up out in El Monte, California there, back in the 40s and 50s, we had a Philco radio that was of that same vintage. It was a little different because it was made to be a portable radio. It had a power supply that you could plug into 110 AC, and it also had the chassis was sitting up on a shelf in the case of the radio there. It was a little longer and lower than those look like they are in its shape, but underneath the chassis it had a compartment for batteries as well. It had needed a 90 volt, I think, B battery, and then at least an A battery. I don't think it used a C battery. I'm not sure. Can't remember. But, I'm going to call my nephew because he might still have that thing in the garage out there. And if he does, maybe I could get a hold of it and give it to you. It might be fun for you to play with that.
Well, yeah, I'm still just trying to learn a little bit of this. I did get the schematics for these things. They're in the other room, but I did get the schematics off the internet, and they're sort of hard. Well, there's a couple of vague areas on them, and you know, they're just replication copies. But I was able to, you know, well, figure out, you know, like about you know, some of the voltages going into some of the tubes and some of those things like that, and you know, measured some of that out when I was turning them on and trying to power them up. But you know, I think on both radios there's still a couple of stages that I know, not on this radio, but on, well, let's see, yeah, on this one here, I still need to put in probably the other IF transformer, and then of course the specs are probably not exactly the same, so I don't know if it's possible to how possible it is to change some of the values or something like that, you know, going into some of those newer IF transformers. They're just replication ones, and the old ones got chewed up by mice that got into these things before I got a hold of them. So still trying to figure out, I'm guessing there's probably 2 or 3 probably still like that with both these radios. So it's still going to be a slight challenge to get that figured out.
Brian, are those both AM, just AM only?
Yes.
Okay.
Nobody ever heard of FM back in those years.
I think FM came out just shortly after that on a different frequency than what it is right now. I think it was up.
Yeah, it was a 6 meter band. So it was like 40, you know, 40 megahertz or so. It was below channel 2 at the time.
Oh, okay. So then that was considerably lower than what FM is right now.
Yeah, they kind of reallocated it when they did. There's a lot of politics involved with that, but it had to do with RCA.
But FM didn't come out until what, the mid 50s?
Well,
Actually, I think the late 40s on FM.
Yeah, it was developed before, during the war, during World War II, but because of the war effort, they couldn't really get. And then after World War II, they reallocated the bands and moved all the existing FM radios. They moved it to where it is now at the 90 to 108 or 89 to 108. And so basically obsoleted all the existing FM radios. But I used to see them at Hamfest back east all the time, you know, because they actually, it's the 6 meter band now. So you can actually tune around those, if you have any of those old radios, and get the amateur 6 meter band.
What, Eric, was that when they brought in, you know, when they first started TV up to, and they set up the 2 TV bands on VHF, you know, just starting just above the channel 2 was just above the 6 meter band, and went up to the bottom of the FM band, and then at the top of the FM band, I think they had a couple of things in there, and then there were the upper end of the VHF band that goes up to 117 or so.
Yeah, just below the aircraft band, and it's kind of an
and there's 117 and stuff like that. There's also a telemetry band, or was for a long time. When I was in the Air Force working on that kind of thing at the weapons lab in Albuquerque, we had a lot of our downlinks that they used for nuclear testing in the Pacific. The downlinks were 117 FM.
Yeah, that's also part of that is for radio navigation too, for the airband and the VHF airband. It's right around that area. I just know that because cable companies have to pay a lot of attention to that, so that we don't, if we have any breaks in the cable or anything, it can cause radio location to pull off of pull off of the beacon and cause problems, which it actually did cause an accident once. So we have to monitor that very closely. Although we pretty much just abandon it now. I think, was I muted?
No,
Jerry,
you're
I'll
good.
come,
You're 5 by 9.
Jerry, I'll come back to your question, and the answer is I don't know. I know that Clark was the first one in, and he's up on my top left. I'm next to him, and then Eric was coming in. So the best I can guess is you're ordered, if you will, in the squares by the position that you come in. So I know where was Larry Wood was here. He went out and then came back. So I think it's a little like Echolink. You go to the bottom of the stack, if you will, when you log in. And anybody else have any thoughts, Eric or anybody, about position on the Zoom screen?
Yeah, I have thought on it. I'm running 2 screens, and the speaker is on one screen, and then the order, or the little postage stamp size photos are on the other screen, and nobody jumps around anymore. But if you're only running one screen, whoever the speaker is, it kind of reorders it. So that's what I've observed. I don't really know if there's a way to configure that so it doesn't do it or not.
So Jerry, I don't know if you're ever going to get an answer to your question, but we just have to watch it as it goes, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm trying to learn to watch for the green bar that around the speaker. Right now it's around myself. It's just around you. And that's all I can tell because people keep jumping around.
Okay. Well, if I can, I have one bit of information to share with everybody, and that is today is the last day that we'll use the current meeting ID, which is we're going to move to the club Zoom account, and that meeting ID for the club. And Bob, didn't you have Pete put that out and Trish put it out in a blog?
Yeah, it's on that sheet, the latest blog. We had to send out a correction because Pete didn't eliminate one of the little the last meeting thing. He had a couple lines when he substituted in. So anyway, yeah, the new. Why don't you tell them what it is and explain how that works, because then you'll never forget it.
Okay. The new meeting ID is going to be 970-146-8800. So if that sounds a little bit familiar, it's the sunlight frequency with a couple of zeros added, one zero added. So that's the meeting ID that you put in. So starting, I guess it would be Monday night, that would be our test, and then Tuesday morning, we'll go to breakfast on the new club ID, meeting ID for the club. And then Bob, would you share with everybody, and by the way, thank you, Kevin, for getting everything together with the tax thing and putting the account together. And Kevin did a lot of work putting together the tax thing with the Zoom account and the payments and everything like that. So, Bob, you want to share, or Clark, you want to share with everybody that the Zoom account will be available to any club member who wants it?
We're not hearing you, Clark. you got to change your position there.
Let me try this. Is this better, Bob?
Much.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we have discussed this about it being available for the club. And in fact, in my household, a couple times recently, we've had good reason to maybe want to use it. So I think we should do that. You know, in our case, we have a grandson, and then there was some other, my 75th birthday. We're going to use it for that.
So when I have my French circle, Jess, is that something that I should use yours, the club's Zoom's account for, or should I just keep paying for my own?
Well, I would think that it would be available to any club member that wanted to use it for any reasonable thing. As far as I'm concerned, you just request it and reserve it. And I know that Steve over in Aspen reserved it, and I sent him the login information, all the information. So he'll be our first test case using it. May 31st, I think he has it scheduled. So Sue, I don't see any reason why you can't.
Oh, that sounds good. Kevin, do you have any problem with doing that?
No, we pay $150 a year whether we use it or not, so go ahead.
Okay, well, maybe I'll stop paying for my own Zoom then. And Jess, my French circle meets from noon till 1:30 every Tuesday, and I'd like to reserve that.
Okay, I'll put you down on reoccurring. Sue, when you get a chance, would you just send me a little note so I can get everything right and then send you all the information you need to get back in? The other thing that I suggested it, and Bob, again, I don't know if you put it in the notes, but we might want to take turns hosting this meeting or our Monday meeting. So anybody who wants to get a feel for how to host a meeting can. So that would be a little test meeting for anybody who wants to host it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, Jess. Is it, can you set it up reoccurring for like a month at a time or something like that? And, you know, and if somebody wants to do it or play with it, you know, try it out, I guess, learn the instructions on setting up a meeting. Maybe we could use one Monday night to do that and kind of teach people what they have to do on their end in order to use the ID.
Okay, so be it. And what I'll do is maybe once every couple of weeks, I'll share with everybody in the club what the schedule is for the Zoom and let everybody know what schedule is there. And then we'll set up a reoccurring meeting for anybody who wants to get on and be a host and see kind of some of the little mechanisms that are there. And then Frank, you know, you're such an experienced Zoom user, you might be able to help guide some of the newbies on some of the particulars of hosting and things like that. And I think Eric also might be some good instructors and teachers too for the newbies on Zoom.
Oh,
You know,
I think you're giving me more credit than I do.
Have I got it now? I think I do. One thing you might do is have somebody be Zoom master and get all the reservation. Well, it wouldn't be that much. It would be just people would call that person up or send them an email when they wanted to use it. And maybe you could set it up and we could put something on a page of the blog not the blog, but the website that the club has, you know, one of the back pages, you know, people that have certain times that want to use it, that could just be a little list there showing when it's reserved. Would that work? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that person is Jess. And maybe what we can do is use Monday night for the instruction night. So if somebody wants to learn how to do that, use the Monday night for that, and set up the Tuesday morning and Thursday night sessions that we have for a month at a time or something, and just let those things run. So Jess doesn't have to show up every time for that. If we know it's set up for that month, and then hopefully one of these days, soon rather than later, that we be able to have breakfast together as friends, I guess. That'd certainly be nice, and I'm assuming that's going to happen sometime in the near future here.
I think it is. I think it's a lot sooner than you think.
Oh yeah.
Well, Bob, I'll put it together maybe for a month out, and assuming that maybe we'll be able to get back in person and put some things out on the club website or through the email just to kind of get us going. And if anybody's interested in hosting it, I volunteered to kind of be, Jerry, I like what you said, the Zoom master. I like that one.
This is Sheldon.
Okay.
Can I put Zoom Master on my resume? That's number one. Number two, I think on Thursday, somebody had a Zoom meeting, and the idea was to teach people how to get onto Zoom. And there were only two of us there. And I've helped a lot of people get onto Zoom using their telephone and sitting at their computer. But if you don't know how to get onto Zoom, a Zoom meeting isn't the way to teach it. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Well, we'll move along and learn as we go. So we'll have some more opportunities, and the fact, Phil, you got on, I'm proud of you. So that's a good step, and we'll make it. So that's all I have.
Hi, this is Jeff with Quail Run RV Park. It looks like we just missed a call on this number.
Yeah, Jeff is Fred. I'm in the back road there at 126.
Yeah,
and
I
I had
have
mentioned
a
to you
comment.
that I'm going to be leaving tomorrow morning.
Fred doesn't know he's being heard by the whole group.
He muted now.
He's muted now. Jess, my only comment is that if you set it up for a month in advance, I think it assumes that you're going to be the host. So is there some way that you can go in and assign a different host each time after you've already set it up? I know when I set up my French circle, I had the French circle was there and I wasn't, and the little annotation said the host has not yet arrived. So it was because I had set it up.
Right.
You know, Sue, I've seen it where you can set it up with a waiting room and without. And by the way, first of all, everybody needs to make sure that they've gone to the latest version of Zoom. I think it's 5.02, because it has some security features that won't let you get in. But Sue, I think I've set it up so that it didn't have a waiting room so people could just log in, because Clark was logged in before I logged in as the host. Is that what you mean?
No, that isn't what I mean. Everyone in the French circle was logged in. I didn't make them go to a waiting room, but there were certain features that couldn't happen unless the host did it. And if I wasn't there, then nobody could do it. I don't recall exactly what we were trying to do. But just in terms of who is hosting it, I'm not sure how you assign someone else to be the actual host. If you've set it up, I think you are the host automatically.
So I think Frank knows.
Frank, you mentioned that a while back. I think whoever's going to host has to sign into the account, the club account. And once they've signed into the club account, then when they start the meeting, they're automatically assigned to the host. So for instance, Sue, if you were setting up the meeting for your group, you would sign in with the club account, and then you would be the host because you signed in as the club account. And by the way, the password to sign into the the club account is Sunlight 88. Sun is the S in Sun is capital, and we'll send it out to people who want to host. I think, Sue, that might be the answer to your question.
Sounds good.
Okay, well, we'll work on it. So that was my little spiel. Clark, back to you.
All right, what are we gonna do next? We have done the show and tell and had the presentation. Is there any further business that we want to discuss? We just throw that out.
I just wanted to bring up an upcoming meeting topic that might be of interest. Is last weekend there was an article in the papers. You know, it's all the same company, but it's, you know, the Aspen Times and the Post Independent about the what are they? The Aspen Global Change Institute, and they have they measure snowpack and water moisture on the mountains. And I just saw an email address and figured I'd check it out, and about the club and possibly doing a presentation. And in response I got back, I'd be happy to talk to your club about our weather and soil moisture network and its technology. Be interested to hear about the experience of people who use the No Citizens Observers Group weather program, which is if you have an APRS station, a lot of, you can tie it into the CWOP, and it adds to the sensor networks for weather monitoring. And there's a bunch of them around. I know I've seen Bob and you know, and one of Chuck's in there as well from time to time as a source for that. And but anyway, so that's coming up. It can either be, you know, just whenever we do our next meeting, or you know, if we you know, in the fall, maybe if we do a sit down meeting. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that it's might be an upcoming, or will be an upcoming topic, or probably will be an upcoming topic.
Sounds great.
Isn't our next meeting field day? Isn't that what usually happens in June?
Yeah, we could, I guess what we could do is, I was looking at the calendar here, we could, seeing we don't know really what's happening at field day, other than we're probably not going to get together in one location. We could do that either in July. Okay, Eric, if is that person willing to do it on a weekend or not?
Yeah, I believe so. You know, I mean, it's a very, but I figured I'd get that out there and see what, you know, just let you know it's coming. It could be kind of interesting to see how they do their network. I know they do use cellular satellite right now, but you know, see how some of the more commercial type stuff, sensor networks work, and compare it to APRS and some of the other things out there. But yeah, you know, we aren't that far along yet as far as specific dates or anything. So you know, if we do it in June or July, that'd probably be okay, or we can wait till fall or whenever.
I would be very much interested in it.
I got an email this morning from the AARL. Did everyone else get it? You know, with the chairman of the AARL doing a little video, and he mentioned the fact that Daytona is not going to happen this year, and you can still get the badge if you renew your membership or whatever. And also, he talked about field day, but he didn't give any sort of ideas of what they had. But that was just an email, and you click on it, and the little video that he gave a little talk on. Was I the only one who got it?
I didn't look this morning, but my my thought would be, and see how everybody, what they think about this is, maybe we should get together the weekend before field day. I would hope that the ARRL would define some approved method of us operating, okay, for field day. And maybe do it the week before, because I suspect we're going to do it individually, is my guess. That's what they indicated earlier. But they never specified any rules like, could we all use the club call, for instance, and operate? Or would that not be illegal or approved or whatever? Or how would you do a club entry, okay? Those would be things, and maybe that would be defined, I would hope, before field day. So maybe we should have just a meeting like today and discuss that.
Yeah, the only thing I really read so far was like that they'd offer, or they'd allow like remote rig type operations. So it'd be maybe somebody sets up remotely somewhere, and we just take turns doing a remote operation type of a thing, which could probably be pretty difficult, at least around here. So, you know, that'd be one option. But and I was kind of thinking this afternoon, if I get enough motivation to do it, I might start driving out a few sites and seeing if I could see Anvil Point or Sunlight, you know, so like maybe up on Grass Mesa or somewhere up that way, that we could get to the club network, and, you know, open up some possibilities maybe for a remote rig type operation where somebody sets up and mans the site, and then we can all operate remotely. But you know, I can imagine CW would be pretty hard to operate remotely.
Yeah, one of the things we could possibly do is Ash has a remote site right just south of Phil.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of my first thought on that. You know, but he's on a cellular connection, and I don't know if he wants to have it on for, you know, 24 plus hours nonstop.
Yeah, and it's also kind of reacts slowly when you're changing frequencies, when you're working remote like that. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's kind of somebody on site. You know, we could set up somewhere that we wouldn't necessarily, you know, assign a few people who would, you know, stay there or take shifts operating, or maintaining. So we'd maintain generators and, you know, make sure the things stay up. And then as far as actual operating goes, you know, we could, you know, that way we don't have to disinfect anything as much, you know, and that sort of thing. I mean, if we actually did do a shift type operation, we'd probably want to, you know, have a pretty strong, you know, infection type thing between. But if we have like designated 2 or 3 people to maintain the stations and maintain the generators and whatnot, you know, that'd be one option. That'd be difficult but doable. You know, if we would want to have some kind of a group controlled station. Just throwing out.
I wanted to go. Oh, go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
Just, you know, just throwing ideas out, you know, stuff I've been thinking about.
Kind of, Eric, to tag on, I have a selfish request. By the time I got my license in 2012 and figured out there was a field day, when I came up to field day, I found out I was allergic to everything in the world and couldn't come to field day. And I've never really got the basics of field day. So, Bob, if you're talking about having a session, I'd like to selfishly ask the field day 101 type of situation, and kind of ask to go back and help a little bit with how the basics of field day and what they really are. I might be the only one who needs it, but if we can throw that in, that might be helpful for me.
Yeah, well, the basic is you can, we normally had 3 stations operating. We had a single sideband station, a CW station, and a digital station. Okay, so we would man those. We'd set up a schedule for each of those tents, and you know, you'd sign up for an hour of operating and an hour of logging. So we usually had 2 people at each station. Optimally, obviously, sometimes early in the morning, nobody was operating because nobody signed up for those times. But that's how the operation went. And the gist I kind of got from the first go from the ARRL is that, you know, it's really complicated to do what Eric said, I think, with the current status that we have. And what the ARRL was proposing early on, and I don't know if they've done anything to solidify this, was people just going out and operating on their own. Okay. And, you know, that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is with Eric suggesting we have one central site and kind of fill it out the same way with, you know, with you were on so many hours and then off, and then you'd have to disinfect or whatever you had to do. That'd be another mode of operation that you could probably do. And the third and easiest probably is most people here have their own station, and you can operate at home with your own station. You don't even have to run a generator. All the generator would do would change your class. Okay, so and off the top of my head, I don't know what the difference between using a generator at home is. I think it's if you use the electrical power means that you have and just operate your station the way it is, you're a 1 echo, and I think you're a 1 delta if you use a generator. So probably the easiest thing to do would be just to have people, you know, operate their own stations at home, and you know, that's the way we'd go with that. So anyway, Jess, does that kind of cover what you know or don't know?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get to the other part of it later on. So I just want to ask some questions how you're designated the 1, the 2, and the delta stations, but we'll get to that later on. I don't want to take everybody's time.
Yeah, normally there's a potluck involved too.
It's Sheldon. Can I get in here a second?
Yeah, you can get in, Sheldon.
Okay. I don't know what the situation's going to be a year from now or a month from now, and I'm wondering whether we just couldn't, you know, take temperatures of people showing up at field day, wear masks, and have hand sanitizers in each one of the stations. And it seems to me, I mean, it's kind of like going to the grocery store, isn't it? So I don't know if that would work or if everybody would go for that.
With the way that I hear things are going all over the country, I think you got a good point there, Sheldon. And around here, I think that may well happen, and this thing will be gone by that time, essentially. Other parts of the country, like New York City and LA, that insist on locking things down for the next year indefinitely, that's a different story, but that's my opinion of it. I say wait and see here for at least another 4 weeks. We got 6 weeks before this is going to happen, and let's see what happens.
So just to kind of give a little summary, so that what I've been living with at work since mid-March is I have a sign-in sheet that I have to sign every day that says that I have shown no signs of this thing. Starting next week, I have to take my temperature every morning. As soon as I show up at work, well, this has been ongoing too. That's starting next week. I have to start taking my temperature every day and logging it. When I show up at work, I have to wash my hands. Have to, you know, sign off that I haven't shown any symptoms or anything like that. I'm expected to wear gloves, mask while I'm in the head end, which nobody else goes in there. You know, I just want to make that clear. This is how this is the Comcast way of doing things. Once a week, I have to go through and wipe down all the surfaces in the head. This is like 4 hours of my day on Fridays, is wiping down the head end, any place that I think I may have touched or that somebody may have been into. So no, logistically, I don't think that's a good idea. It's going to be really complicated to do that, especially when you figure, you're in a remote site without proper running water or anything like that. Just the liability is a problem. So I think no, the way to go would be probably to try to do something remotely, and maybe, like I said, maybe have a few people, a limited number of people who actually are maintaining the station, the remotely operated station. And then if members want to operate, we'll work out a similar schedule, but they'd have to do it over the internet. But, I think that would be, if we want to do anything like that, other than just operate on our own, I think that would probably be the best possibility.
Well, and Jerry said we got 6 weeks to do it too. So trying to decide right now what to do is going to be kind of hard. And I hear what you're saying about it, Eric, too. It complicates things. We got 30 people up there, you got to put up all that equipment and stuff. And normally we have about 15 people there, 16 people for setup. So, I think we're probably going to have to wait and see what develops here. If things disappear, great. I don't think we'll have an issue. But, if not, how long you stay with a person too. If somebody has it, it's the duration that you stay with anybody. But we're outside, so that's really good. I mean, couldn't ask for a better location unless you're in the tent operating or something. But why don't we? I don't know if we can't probably decide anything today. What do you think there, Clark? Go ahead. We probably should sign off here. We've been running a couple hours already.
Yeah. I guess I got two observations on this. There's two scenarios I see. One, where we all operate remotely at our own facilities, and we don't have any group gathering at all, and that's no problem. The other one is where things are pretty much cleared up and there's not a problem. The scenario Jerry's been pushing, where it's not a problem and we can have group gatherings and we just do what seems reasonable. I'm kind of thinking with this group, what exactly is reasonable? And Eric has pointed out what companies are doing in order to meet them. So we might be able to do the whole group thing normally with some additional things. But like you say, you got to wait. KB3BSS is on a phone in the background. I don't know if it's messing up my audio or not. But at any rate,
okay.
Like you say, you got to wait. That's what I think. You wanted to say something, Jerry?
I said, you're okay. Whatever was in the background was not messing you up whatsoever. So that's.
It was Peter on the telephone walking through the room, and I thought maybe it was messing up the audio. That's all.
But as a newbie, let me ask this question. There's the planning aspect of it, and you're going to need so much time to plan for it. And there comes a point where it would seem that you don't have enough. You've gone beyond the planning time. And just as an example, and I know it's not right, but let's say 2 weeks from now we still don't know, and that's not really enough time to plan. Does that kind of scenario come into it? And if so, what's that cutoff planning date, if you will?
Well, we spend about 2 weeks planning. Maybe I'm wrong, but my impression is, a normal field day, Bob and Phil and all these other people that are bringing equipment, pretty much have it all laid out. It's a question of gathering it all together and then getting it on site and getting the committee there. And I don't think it takes a whole lot of planning normally. However, it looks like we have two possible scenarios as to our preparation on this. One where we're all just doing it on our own, and the other one where we're all doing it together with some enhanced separation, whatever you want to call it in there. So I think what your point is, there's a time when it's too late. We could just wait too long and it would be too late to actually implement whatever we want. Where is that? Is that 2 weeks before field day or a month before field day? I think if we worked on it really hard, 2 weeks before field day would probably be the drop dead date.
You know, the interesting thing,
I have a thought.
I look at field day, the interesting part about that is emergency. Field day is supposed to prepare for emergencies. That was the original idea of it, I think. Okay, and if that is the case, emergencies don't give you any warning. You scramble around and do the best you can, period. Story.
What are some other clubs in the country planning on doing? Is there any way of finding out, see if they, through the ARL or something like that?
Good question.
The ARR, as far as I'm concerned, has given us virtually no indication of anything at all, and I think everybody's waiting. I suspect the club is not going to do one thing either. I suspect some of us will choose to do it at home. I think some of people may choose to do it in small groups. Maybe some people, based on the conversation here, would like to do a larger group, but I don't think we can decide that right now. That's just my opinion.
I'd like to offer some thoughts if I can. Guess I got it. First of all, here, and I'm sure you're seeing similar things in Aspen area, they're canceling things that cause people to gather way out into the fall already. And so I think any large group gathering is impractical. I myself wouldn't show up for one. It's until this virus is not going away, number one. Number two, until there's everybody's inoculated, there's always some percentage chance that somebody's going to get infected and have a dire outcome from it, just beyond being sick. And I think we're all candidates for that age group. Having said that, I can see a scenario where some of us that have RVs that can contain our COVID-19 germs, if we have any, within that facility, that where we could gather and maintain social distancing, provided we're running our own stations inside our own RVs. But the logistics of that isn't all that great either. So I just think that it's not a practical situation. So that's my bottom line.
Can I get in here again? I don't know. I think there's an element of risk when you wake up in the morning and walk around your house. To me, field day has always been educational. And, forget the contests and all the things that happen during field day. It's been a great way for people who've got the RVs to get away for a weekend. And it's been very educational for me. We can have it any weekend. For the club can have it any weekend. It doesn't have to be, next month and tied in with ARL. So again, that's my observation, and we can see and wait what happens. Maybe we can do it in the fall. But again, I don't see why it has to be done with, where everyone is tied together. And I don't have a station here, so if everybody does it individually, I can't take part of it unless I go over somebody else's home. And now we're opening up the element of risk. So anyway, that's it.
Folks, I think that's a pretty good summary of what the alternatives are. And of course, they're pretty broad. So, I don't think we're in a position to make a decision today. But when you look at the options, what's probably going to fall out is something that works simply. And we got some trade-offs we're going to have to make. And it's not going to be a field day, I don't think, like regular field days. I don't believe that's going to really happen. I mean, something is going to give on this. Either we don't make it a big event and we keep everything in small groups, or we just do it individually. I mean, whatever it is, it's not going to be as Sheldon was saying here, the opportunity for the community to understand what amateur radio is all about and emergency radio and all the public affairs stuff that we've done in the past. That's out the window on this one. So whatever, I'm comfortable with just letting it go for a little while we look at what the options are and the things that we have to do in order to pull it off. But in the end, the way these things usually work out, you pick something that's simple that we can implement and implement quickly. So it'll be, the 2-week prep time, I think is probably a rule we're going to have to follow. So whichever route we go, we should just try something simply. And Jerry's comment about, the whole thing is emergency communication for emergency for field day. Well, what do you think this is right now?
This is a strange emergency, Clark, very unlike most of things what field day is supposed to be. Hurricanes, earthquakes, et cetera, okay? And they don't give you any warning more than a few seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it's still an emergency.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you, Jerry. Okay, I can't be heard. Okay. Look, it's still an emergency. Yeah, it's not like the ones that we've been preparing for before, but still, it is an emergency. So maybe what creative plan we come up with could be used should this ever happen again. I don't know. Anyway, that's the observation I want to make. I've had enough of this discussion, and oh Lord, it's lunchtime. So guys, I'm ready to call a meeting.
I agree fully. Wait for 2 or 3 weeks at least and see what happens.
Okay, everybody, I'll pull the plug, Clark, whenever you say.
All right, go ahead and pull the plug. Keep those wheels turning in your head. Come up with alternatives. Try to figure out ways we can do this. And let's try to make it simple, straightforward, and fun like it is every year. That's my last parting comment. I'm out of here.
Okay, good meeting, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
One quick one before we shut off here. I guess